One of the things that we have lost is the conceptualization of the black industrialist. Black industrialist is not equivalent to you or anyone else owning 26%. Local industries, they don't have a role to play. They cannot even have a shelf to pack their beans or their spinach. When they went to the US, government was supposed then to take a stance against, because for us that is tantamount to treason. We are supporting the concept of, or the notion of a transformation fund.
Fam, I just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Pace Car Rental. Use promo code SMWX for 10% off your next car rental, and make sure you show Pace some love as they're showing this channel some love. Now, let's get into the episode.
Spread the fire. Welcome to SMWX. I am, of course, not Sizwe Mpofu Walsh. He's out of the country, so I'm standing in for him. I am Lukhona Mnguni, quite well acquainted with this platform as a guest, as a viewer, and of course now I'm about to be the interviewer. And I've got a fantastic guest for you, Elias Monage, the president of the Black Business Council. And I think there's just so much to talk about: the state of the economy, the state of the country, the state of business, unemployment issues, South Africa in the world at a time of massive geopolitical shifts that are happening around us, and of course the country itself experiencing its own political dramas that from time to time would impact on business and the state of business, but more importantly the state of governance. I must say I was very appalled ducking potholes on the M1 on Gauteng highways. I thought, my goodness, where are we? Anyway, Elias, greetings to you. How are you?
No, good afternoon to you and the viewers.
No, thank you for joining us here at SMWX. You just are fresh from your annual, business summit and awards and what. Just give us a sense this year. What was the key focus area? Is the conversation shifting? Are you seeing some gains for black business?
I mean, quite right. This year our summit was different from all previous years. The reason why it was different is because we spent time talking about solutions, action-orientated summit, as opposed to complaints. The second thing, the summit was taking place at the time when the country will be hosting the G20. So we need then to reflect on the G20, what does that mean for black businesses, and how then do we see the road ahead. Thirdly, was taking place at a time when the government is different from the previous years, because it's a government of national unity. We need then to say, how do we relate to government of national unity as a Black Business Council? How do we deal with the current plethora of challenges on the broad-based black economic empowerment, where we have seen a range of individuals and organizations that they are calling for the scrapping of the broad-based black economic empowerment. This summit was also taking place at a time when the geopolitics was taking a different turn, and therefore we then thought we need then to reflect and map a clear way forward as a black business organization to say, how do we navigate and deal with those issues, and what are the challenges and action that you are suggesting?
And I mean, what would you say would have been the key takeaways? Because, I mean, as you are saying, there are massive challenges, supply chain, value chain issues. Various industries are seeing different, challenges, but there are also opportunities, of course, in some sectors. Like, if you look at, green hydrogen in the Northern Cape and Western Cape parts, is black business making inroads there? I mean, we'll talk a bit about other things, because your organization has also criticized the latest bid window for battery storage awards for Eskom.
I guess some of the issues around the current state of the economy is when we are seeing a continuous exclusions of black businesses in the main around various issues. For example, we talk about the auction of spectrum that took place. government, for whatever reasons, they were not bold enough to allocate funding to bring black organization or historically excluded people to participate in the auctioning of a spectrum. Because if indeed if you continue talking about inclusive economy, you need then to be bold and courageous and then put systems together. That's one thing. Secondly, you cannot then continue to talk about inclusive economy, but your actions are contrary to that. So you need then to say, what are the things that you're going to put in place? What are the instruments and mechanisms that will then allow people then to navigate and traverse from where they are to the notion of an inclusive, so that you then look at that. The third part for us is the continuation of monopoly and conglomerates that, again, as government, they're not bold enough to say to what extent are we continuing with the notion of conglomerates or concentration of certain markets. You look at pharmaceutical industry. Why are we not having black pharmaceutical companies playing in that space? Why are we not seeing various other components in manufacturing of medical instruments? So for us, I guess the point is around what are the solutions. Part of the solutions around putting a proper procurement regulatory regime that will then allow participation of historically disadvantaged individuals, so that the set aside that is in the primary legislation from the Procurement Act must then give effect by a regulatory framework that says how then do you deal with the health sector, where consciously so you then says these are the things that are going to do. You then outline them upfront. Secondly, if procurement is not geared towards bringing historically disadvantaged individuals, in the absence of a regulation, that becomes a problem. You then look at all state entities, whether it can be Transnet, it can be PRASA, it can be Eskom, it can be various other entities. They need then to say, what are the things that are going to do in terms of procurement by virtue of bringing historically individuals into this thing. To what extent, again, are we then looking at the skill sets, not the skills of now, but the skills of tomorrow, the skills for the future, so that consciously so we then look at both education and training to say what type of training do we require to meet the requirements for sectors in terms of the artificial intelligence, so that you don't leave the bulk of the people behind. To what extent are we then dealing with number of sectors, whether you talk about in the energy space, the Transnet, Eskom, they're talking about 14,000 transmission lines. To what extent are you then bringing various other entities into the space, whether they're black-owned, women-owned, youth-owned, people living with disability, so that they then participate in that area. Equally so, to what extent do you then bring and prepare education institutions then for the youth then to come on board in terms of addressing the unemployment in the country? So these are some of the issues that for us, they're critical to the coming period, so that we don't have to wait for the bid then to be issued, but we need then to move with speed in terms of putting things together, in terms of being more clearer than ever before to say what are the things that we require from education, from training institutions, so that they then prepare and deal with this thing at an early stage, so that it then allows a broader participation in the economic spheres.
Let me just stay a bit with this education issue, because you've touched on it a number of times. I mean, I often make an example with India. At some point in the 1960s, India developed what was called India Technology Institutes. I think that started with launching 2 or 3, and then eventually they legislated these and pumped a lot of resources, and they sprawled in terms of the number of institutes. And it's no doubt that today in the ICT space, India globally has produced leading people in the technology sector, whether it's manufacturing of components, fixing of electronics, and all of these things, and of course coding, all of these things that come with it. What is the problem here in our country from a business point of view? Because we often talk about the skills mismatch, and we talk about people ending up in jobs that they did not study for because there's not enough market for what they may have studied, or there's a sense that, universities and universities of technology and TVETs are not producing people who are work ready. And some industries feel that they actually have to upskill people even as though they come in as graduates. There's something at a planning level. What is the conversation and what is the blockage?
So you might recall that in this country we used to have technicons that were geared to bring people, not academics, but to bring individuals that are technically competent. And those technicons were linked to industries in various forms and shapes. The second part, we then had training, vocational training that was designed and developed at the back of the German model, where industries will basically then open their shop floor for people then to come and then do the practicals. And after that, they then go to a trade center. Here in Joburg, we used to have an institution called Olifantsfontein. It was a trade center where people, they go there not to write, but to demonstrate the skills that they can. If he's an electrician, the person will then be given an assignment then to do this thing. If he's a motor mechanic, they will do that thing. So various areas of technical competencies based on a vocational training, and that was linked to employment. Now, there's some of the things that we've done wrong for the past 20 or 30 years or so in this country is when we then move the training boards. Remember, we used to have training boards that were sector-based. And then we established what is called Sexual Education and Training Authority, which is SETAs now. The SETAs, they use them to reside in the Department of Employment, Department of Labor and Employment. Now, again, the alignment was proper because vocational training is linked to employment. It's not academic. Now, we then moved them, I think a few years ago, by a proclamation from the president to move them from employment to higher education and training. And that's where we've done a mistake, because once we then move vocational training to academic, we imply that we want industries, they want academic people. And we also then change the technicons. We are no longer having technicons. Instead, we develop University of
Technology.
Technology.
And some of those universities of technology, what they've now done, I mean, if you look at University of Johannesburg, for example, which is the old RAU and Wits Technikon, they've completely switched from diploma and made everything now a degree, and that practical P1 and P2 that people used to do in their national diplomas is no longer there.
No, quite right. And I'm saying that's part of the problem. And one of the things that we spent time at the summit was basically then to reflect specifically on the skills that is required. And you cannot then have the discussion on the skills under the current dispensation. You need then to have a different framework, a different institution, a different architecture that can then deal with employment and the skills that are required in the employment sector, so that again, you are then going back to basics in terms of vocational training, competency-based, so that whatever that individuals they are doing at the work at the factory floor, at the shop floor level, you might then redirect it to be recognized in a particular institution, so that those skills are then required by the industry. The technology that they are trained at those institutions is what they will find in the at the workplace.
So who must take responsibility at the end of the day? Because it's easy to say this is where we're going wrong. I mean, government at some point, you'll remember, was even making an admission that perhaps it was wrong to close down things like teacher colleges, nursing colleges, and there was a call for a reopening of those, removing them from universities. Nothing has happened. So who must be blamed at the end of the day? Because surely we can't carry on like this, I mean, as a country.
I think surely government must take a blame on that, but equally so, business cannot then fold their arms and says, we have nothing to do with this thing. We have a role to play. And this is one of the areas that we have said, we need then to have an engagement with the economic cluster. That engagement with the government economic cluster is when we then reflect on issues of this nature, to say to Minister of Employment, Minister of Education, the current framework is not working for business. Therefore, let's go back to the relationship between employment and vocational training, so that whatever skills that is there or is needed in the sector, we then harness it, we then rebuild it from a factory floor level, so that we then bring and absorb the unemployed, because most of those people, they're not meant to be academics. So if a person wants them to be technical, we need them to bring those people. Whether it's a technician, an artisan, a welder, we need them to bring them, because if you were to have vocational training back into the system, rest assured, we can then have the current unemployment figures, because people, they will have the skills then to be electrician, plumbers, and millwright, and they're not going to spend any day without a foot on the table, because they have skills that they can then do many other things that will assist them and assist the economy.
I mean, as business, you pay a lot of money to government just on the skills levy. I mean, government collects quite a substantial amount of money.
Yes.
It has even overwhelmed in terms of spending that money. They are always like on a backlog spending. But do you feel you are getting value for money in terms of that skills levy? Because even the mandate of SETAs, at some point, there was a point where the Minister of Higher Education and Training some years ago was not even sure whether they must, prolong the mandate of SETAs or they must fold and close down. Of course, there are other dramatic events that happen when people say they are being used for patronage, what. The minister recently had to fold and restart the process of appointing chairpersons of various SETAs.
I mean, we don't think that there is value for money in the current setup, because whatever that individuals are going through across the SETAs, industries, the question, those skills that individuals, they possess. If, for example, you were then to talk about an artisan, the artisan in the main supposed then to come from metal and related. But if somebody then comes from retail to say is an artisan in retail space, holding a paper from the retail SETA is questionable, because it basically means that, again, the question of the alignment and proper configuration not done. And hence I'm saying there is no value for money in terms of the current thing. And that's the reason why we're then calling for a review of that system. That's one. Two, we're then saying we need then to have a proper engagement with the cluster, so that we then separate vocational training from the normal academic, because the two streams are not the same. And individuals, they can then choose their own path. There are people that even if they go to school, they're not cut for being academic. They want them to be technical. They want them to possess trade skills. Trade skills and academic, two different things. And therefore, if we're then to have that engagement, is when we're back into the realm of dealing with the skills that industries and sectors they need, so that those individuals, they can exercise and rebuild the economy. We cannot then talk about the rail infrastructure if we don't have people that they are technically competent and holding trade in the rail. You cannot then talk about water and sanitation if we don't have people that we don't have enough plumbers in the country. And this is one of the reasons why even now you look across the regions and areas, there are incidences where on the road you'll then have a burst pipe and nobody can then fix it. Is because in certain areas there is a shortage of plumbers.
No, I mean, it's quite true that the maintenance, I mean, and the more you move out of the city towards the peri-urban, towards the rural communities, we find somebody in the village, if you are lucky in your village to have running water, somebody who's not even a trained plumber, but babizo manyinda, like bush mechanics. So people who have not really done much. But we can stay on this education question for a long time, because it's a really important issue for business, because these are interlinked things, skills and so on. But let's move a little bit. I want to talk about what I deem to be an assault on transformation. I mean, you spoke about individuals and organizations whom some we know have even gone as far as to the US to effectively badmouth the country. It's not to say that things are jolly and good in terms of our country, but there seems to be a very clear re-emergence of an attack. You spoke about broad-based black economic empowerment. There's been a big fight, as you know, in the mining sector on the interpretation of once empowered, always empowered. It even went to court, and there's still a huge disgrievance, I must say, from some people on those issues. What would you say is the view of BBC at this point in time on this question around the transformation project, the national question?
I think we are 31 years in democracy, and if one were then to say, have we moved to the degree and to the level that is acceptable, the answer is no. We're still like at an infant stage where we can then say majority of the people, they've been empowered. It then means that a transformation must be an imperative for the country. We need then to drive transformation more than any other period. We need then to say, what are the things that we need then to do? And I'm raising that point is because if when we're to look at number of sectors, I mean, rightly so, retail, you look at banking, you look at construction, you look at even pharmaceutical industry, you look at property sector. I mean, you cannot even talk about 1% of the people that have been, or there is 1% that confidently you can say the sector is transformed. To look at engineering is the same. I mean, the list is long. So for us, one of the things that the proponents of anti-transformation, they continue to peddle is that transformation and the deals were done by the same suspects over and over and over. And I think that is not true, because if one were then to look at, there was a period in our country where deals were done by, I would call it the same individuals that they have cash. Because one of the barrier for transformation is two things, is the access to funding. And the second thing is market access. Now, if one of the requirements is that you need then to have the skin in the game, as me and you, Lukhona, we want them to participate in whatever sector. If we don't have the skin in the game, we're then excluded. And those who have money, they will then continue then to participate in those areas. And that is a major issue, that those individuals that they are anti-transformation, they're not dealing with the real issue. The real issue is a barrier for entry, which is access to funding and access to market.
And of course, this access to funding and markets talks exactly about, transformation of the banking sector,
Yes.
its outlook. And as you know, some things that you are also involved with as BBC. Let's talk a little bit about construction you mentioned. There are companies that used to be there. They've merged, demerged, consolidated into very much fewer now. In actual fact, we probably know very less construction companies than back then in the day when we used to know quite a number, Marian Roberts, Ramdale, and even those were products of mergers, of consolidation and so on. Big issue now is concessions on the national highways, like the entry concessions, for example. Just give us a bit there. What's the state of play there? I'm curious. I don't have enough, but
no, you're quite right that the previous construction company, I call it the previous, because we are not longer having your Group 5, your Marian Roberts, and Greenacre, LTA, whatever. And it was as a result of, there was a certain trajectory in the construction industry that there is a merger, and they then built into conglomerates. And at a particular time, then it was disfragmented. You have seen a fragmentation of the construction industry, particularly post-2010.
After that collusion of course the penalties by the Competition Commission after the World Cup build program.
And fast forward, most of them, they've closed down. And now we are then seeing also young emerging companies then coming again. And that re-emergence of those construction companies, they partner with overseas companies, and they are mopping all other construction infrastructure purely on the basis of concessions. And again, one of the requirements on the concession, you need then to have the bucks, you need to have money. If you don't have the money, you're not going to participate. Again, that is another exclusions. We have seen SANRAL have awarded lots of tenders to Chinese companies.
Big controversy in some instances, particularly on the N2 new development corridor that is being done along my very area of Msigaba, around the Flagstaff Bizana and so on.
And that's the point. And that's why I was saying, if you then look at that emergence, is because, again, people are then excluded purely on the basis of putting cash into the system. If you don't have money to run a concession, you cannot then do anything.
Do you buy the story they sell that, they go with the best deal? Shouldn't there be more proactive action?
I don't buy that story because, again, let's look at this thing differently. If government, they were bold enough in terms of addressing inclusivity, they were supposed then to facilitate funding from the pension funds. We have a PIC, we have a GPF, we have other pensions. If we are then talking about concessions or concessionary agreements, you can then talk about the BOT, you build, operate, and transfer. You then bring funding from pension institutions so that you then bring historically disadvantaged companies or individuals into the mainstream. And when you then do that thing, you also then allow partnership and the consolidation so that they consolidate into various areas of expertise.
But again, I'm not sure where we are missing this issue, because you'll remember at some point people thought it was controversial of the ANC in its, not even 2024, in its 2019 manifesto, when they spoke about prescribed assets. And there were calls for amendments to schedule, I'm forgetting now. You might remember.
28.
Yes. 28. But it seems as if that died. That conversation has sort of just fizzled out.
Yeah, for a number of reasons. Because, again, fast forward, if you then look at what happened in recent past, government, they've launched what we'll call it OV, Operation Vulindlela 1 and 2. And at the heart of that, they're looking at various other things. But again, there is a huge gap in terms of dealing with funding. There is an absence of a dedicated process to say, how then do we bring historically disadvantaged individuals then to participate? Whereas on the other side, we continue to talk about inclusive economy. I mean, how do you include people that historically were excluded? How do you deal with a provision in the Constitution that says government must then come with the regulation that will then redress the imbalance of the past? And if, again, consciously so, we don't have any mechanisms, we don't have any framework that facilitate that participation, you are forever perpetuating.
Well, it seems as if those who look like us, who were previously, oppressed, to be quite frank, are still cordoned off to the township economy and the spaza shops fund, and that's where we seem to be expected to play. But there was a program that was started, 100 black industrialists. Now, I tend to understand an industrialist as somebody who makes some things, but I'm not seeing 100 factories that have gone up. But money has been spent, and DTICT say it's been a very, very good project, and they are happy with it. What do you say?
I don't think so. I mean, you might recall that I was vocal, or we were vocal during the sixth administration when we dealt with this concept of black industrialists during the time of Minister Ibrahim Patel, because we basically said one of the things that we have lost is the conceptualization of the black industrialist. Black industrialist is not equivalent to you or anyone else owning 26% of an existing arrangement. Yeah. So that's not an industrialist. An industrialist is a person that owns and controls something, and you participate in the industrial setup. For example, if you were to start a company building transformers, building patents and for whatever, for the locals, you're an industrialist. Because you run genuine things, not about having equity in a particular arrangement. And that's part of the discourse that I think as a country we're supposed then to revisit and review that concept of industrialist, because again, it's not in line with the reindustrialization project. Because for us, if we then talk about reindustrialization, we're basically saying we need them to see people that they are building components for rail infrastructure. That is an industrialist. We want them to see people that are building the power lines for ESCOM. We want them to see black people that they are industrialists, that they are metallurgical, that they're building things for PRASA. And the list is long. So unless and until such time that we review that industrialist program, I think we'll then continue just to tick a box to say that is industrial. That's not. It doesn't even come close to the concept of an industrialist. And these are some of the issues that we have contested, because you might recall when Minister Patel talked about 100 industrialists, we did say, show us
the 100.
Yeah, then he bring people that they sell oranges. We're saying, no, don't waste our time. And I think it then gives you a particular thinking that we need then to contest for. It's not about concepts, because again, the concept of black industrialist is something that was conceived by the Black Business Council during the time when Masina was a deputy minister of Trade and Industry, and the minister was Minister Davis. And we basically said, black industrialist program. But again, the shortcoming was that we didn't define it proper. And this is our concept. And somebody then took it over, and now they're setting us a dummy to say this is a black industrialist. Not.
But aren't we then, if we continuously fail with these things, I mean, now a new 100 billion transformation fund has been launched by Minister Pakstow, and business has been invited to play a role. Of course, the money must come from somewhere, but in terms of also ideas on how it is utilized, I get a sense we're good at conceptualizing, as you are saying, these things, but there's still something in this clause where we say we are still not going to the main issue, and I think you are getting close to it. Talk about financing, talk about monopolies. The president, I remember, in one of his earlier State of the Nation addresses, maybe in 2018 or 2019, he spoke about this question of monopolistic economy being a problem. Because sometimes when you say there's a structural problem in our economy, we don't name. He spoke about monopolies, and that maybe the Competition Commission must be given more powers, more grip to evaluate and create a much more open economic space. But what I see is further consolidation rather than black people coming up as owners of means of production, as owners of certain companies and sectors. All what you see, and you'll know this, big companies always go around, even if you are just trying to run your own risk and advisory company as a black person, you are a chartered accountant, you've opened your own things. These big firms always come around and will make you partner, dangle carrots, buy people out, close those businesses and that potential. So let's talk a bit about this transformation fund, your views on it. There seems to be different perspectives in the sector, in the business community. And then secondly, this issue of clear reconcentration rather than opening up of industries.
I think you will acknowledge that one of the current problems is that in the current BE scorecard, we do have certain elements. Your enterprise development, corporate responsibilities, question of skills development, and so forth. But one of the critical areas that we are not seeing any substantial benefit is on the corporate social responsibility and even on enterprise development. Now, some of us, particularly in the Black Business Council, we are supporting the concept of or the notion of a transformation fund, we've made submissions to that effect. We're basically saying we need then to look at the consolidation of corporate social responsibility and enterprise development, so that you then channel it into a particular fund, so that you can then do a meaningful contribution in addressing and rebuilding some of the infrastructure that is ailing in our country. The second thing we're then saying, that transformation fund can also then set aside funding to deal with the skin in the game, so that people that we want them to participate in the mainstream economy, because one of the critical area, a barrier, is funding. You can then re-channel that to deal with the skin in the game, so that the participation is then realized. The third part for us on the transformation fund, we're then saying that fund should not be run by government. It must be run, whether you want to call it a hybrid model, by both government and
like the Solidarity Fund.
Like the Solidarity Fund. So that you then have a proper structure that accounts and deal with these issues. And then it becomes a proper accountability and so forth. So, and we have seen during the COVID, the Solidarity Fund, it ran effectively and efficiently, so there was no corruption in whatever form or shape.
And what's your view? I mean, some people have been saying, you spoke about Operation Vulindlela 1 and 2.0 now. Government, business has really been going to government and saying, look, we've got some skill sets, we can help you. And I mean, at first it was really around energy, logistics, and water now. Municipalities have been added on that network infrastructure, energy, and so on. But some people say, no, but business, you are getting too close to government. You are doing state capture 2.0. What is your view there?
No, not really. I think our objection, I guess, with the current setup is that whether you want them to talk about those streams, the NICOM, the logistics, whatever, it excludes the historically disadvantaged individuals. Secondly, that structure is basically then bloated by the banking people and the insurance people. So we don't have people that understand industries, which you respect. I'm saying, in whatever form we want them to look at this thing. And the same thing with their Operation Vulindlela. We don't have any black companies or black formations that understand the issues around transformation. We don't have individuals that you will then say they will carry a particular mandate in terms of bringing the historically excluded people. I mean, the entire structure, again, is bloated by people that they don't run businesses, and if they are white people. We don't have people of color that they are sitting there. I'm not talking about people that are employed by state. I'm talking about business people. We don't have them.
But you guys all have access to each other. I mean, you can pick up a call. We saw you beefing with Busa at some point over the B20. Is that sorted? Because, I mean, in reality, these are the organizations that at some point have to find each other and eventually create some pact of sorts amongst yourselves in the business community, isn't it?
Yeah, you're quite right. I guess one of the issues for us is the will from government, because you might recall that we have raised an issue around the B20 participation. We're excluded by design. We're excluded when the handover from Brazil to South Africa took place last year.
So you're saying you were not given a call?
We're excluded by design. I'm saying the handover to the B20 chairmanship or presidency.
Yes, and chairmanship.
Yeah, it was given to Busa, not to Business South Africa. Business South Africa is not Busa. Business South Africa is the combination of the two organizations.
Yes.
And the B20 is not a Busa thing. It's a business thing, the B20. But I'm saying we're excluded because in one of the, for example, the appointment of the consultants, the Bain and McKenzie, they're appointed by Busa.
And you took a serious issue with that as BBC. I mean, I remember the president himself issued a media statement to say he can't force them not to appoint them, but it's quite a regrettable act. What did they say to you? Because I think you guys then had a meeting after that.
Yeah, I'm saying we expected. Remember, the B20 operates at the back of the G20. Now, the presidency cannot say business must sort it out. This is a government program. the G20. Now, at the heart of that, government then invites business. It then means we need them to be aligned on both the program and the agenda.
Because also you've got very important working groups in the B20. I mean, there are many streams.
Yes.
Is it then your view that government has been a bit too hands-off or too distant from some of this process? I mean, we've seen public spats in the Y20, Youth 20, Civil Society 20, B20. Like, people are not getting, and government is just saying, no, they must do it themselves. They must sort themselves out. But that risks a successful G20.
I mean, we don't see a successful G20 and B20, if we're to be honest and frank with you.
I mean, we in June. That's a big statement to make.
No. I'm serious about it, yes. It's because we raised an issue. There was a joint meeting between government and business. When I'm saying business, BUSA and BBC, on the 19th of January this year, we wrote a letter to the presidency to say we're not going to attend that meeting because the documentation that was prepared from business, from BUSA, it come from Bain and McKenzie. We said we cannot be part of an arrangement where...
You feel like it's a sponsored agenda.
Yeah, because it's a sponsored agenda. These are companies that were part of the state capture, and on what basis do we then participate to the agent of state capture? Because it then means we support it. Corruption, we support state capture. And the president then appointed PACS then to facilitate a solution between the two, over and above the statement that the president said the two organizations must sort it out. Today is June. No meeting, no resolution that Minister Paksta have arranged. So it then tells you a story that government are not taking this.
But it seems like things are moving because B20 seems to be moving, but you are clearly saying it's moving without the Black Business Council.
Yeah, they are moving without us. But it doesn't mean that there's no credibility on the B20. That one I can tell you for free. We are of the view that given the fact that the G20 is taking place in our shore, in Africa for the first time, we might not even have it in the next...
our lifetime.
In our lifetime. We want then to arrange our own setup at the back of the G20, where we're basically then bringing all the business formations in the continent. We want to convene that as a Black Business Council. So that we need then to say to government, forget about BUSA, forget about the B20. So that, remember, at the B20, business must then present their programs.
And you're scared you'll be accused of parallelism?
No, we are not afraid of that, because we want them to bring a better configuration, a better and credible arrangement to government, to say to government, remember, government must also then convene meetings of their governments in the continent. And that's the reason why, I guess, Trevor Manuel is then appointed to be the G20 for Africa.
Yes. So
that's where we want them to have that engagement for business in Africa, to engage Trevor and the team, so that government eventually, when they present their program, they then reflect on business in Africa, not business in BUSA.
I suppose, I mean, it's happening pretty soon with the Urban 20, where the African Mayors Summit is happening at the CSIR. So you want an arrangement of that sort,
yes,
where you
quite
have
right.
a consolidated
Yes, quite right. So
view.
we want them to have a consolidated view. And we are of the view that we want them to have that meeting before end of September, so that we can then influence the outcomes of the G20 in different forms and shape. And what we're going to do will also then involve even other international ministers to participate from the G20, to basically then present some of the views, and even business people out of the continent, so that we then take the entire continent with us.
Now, let's talk a bit about, taking the continent with us when we are also clearly a house that is divided. What do you think emboldens organizations like Afriforum with this renewed or resurgence of, it's clear, an assault on transformation, wanting, almost like a Volksstaat of sorts? I mean, they clearly tell you we are going to build our own power stations. We're going to do this for our community. I mean, I was gobsmacked when I was driving to Pretoria one time. There's an entire billboard, ons bloed is Orania, our blood is orange, something of that sort. Now it's now becoming more than just an advocacy group. Clearly, I mean, you probably like a counterweight of organizations like that. What is going on? Why are they so emboldened?
I think they are emboldened because our government, they are on a shaky ground. They don't have the
when you're talking about skills, sorry, university,
Yes, I'm
Centurion built.
I'm saying they are, our government, they're not firm on various things. For example, when they went to the US, government was supposed then to take a stance against, because for us that is tantamount to treason. They were supposed then to charge them because that is a clear sabotage. You cannot then have a situation where they're saying they're going to build their own substations, because any person that builds substations is either ESCOM or municipalities. And you need them to have a regulation to do that. And if they don't have a regulation, surely they need them to face the music. And these are some of the issues that I'm saying government, from a regulatory point of view, from security and various other things, they need them to be firm. And if they're not firm, we then tend to govern by true courts. And we've seen this thing in recent past where various forms of pockets of individuals, organizations, they will take government to court because they want certain things to be done. And I'm saying we need them to be firm. We need them to revisit a clear thing to say, what is the mandate of various institutions? If ESCOM's mandate is then to deal with electricity or energy, they need them to do that. If other entities, their mandate is then to provide gas, they need them to do that. I'm referring to social, I'm referring to your Central Energy Fund, I'm referring to the NERSA. If NERSA is mandated and to do the tariffs and whatever, they need them to do that. So, because immediately when you start dilly-dallying on these issues, it then creates a problem for the country.
And it seems like
the alignment.
And it seems like there are going to be a number of Oranias that are going to emerge. I mean, some people still ask how an Orania exists in South Africa, and there's never really a clear answer.
Quite right, because again, that's where government must then do this thing. That's where government must deal with these issues decisively so. Because in absence of government being bold and being decisive, you're basically creating and encouraging a parallel structure, a dual regime of some sort. And next time people, they will basically then even create their own courts to deal with these issues. And I'm saying we need them to be firm in terms of what are the things that we need them to do, what are the things that they're not doable in the country, and how then do we navigate those issues going forward.
Will the national dialogue be the answer?
I don't think so. The reason I'm saying I don't think so is because, firstly, again, we are back into concepts. Because we need them to define what is the source. What do we want to address? We cannot then talk about a national dialogue if the economy issue still remains in the hands of minority in the country. Because you'll recall with CODESA dealt with the political issues. The economic issues were never dealt with. And I'm saying we need first and foremost then to talk about the economic setup.
So somebody like General Bantu Olomisa has been calling for an economic CODESA for a very long time in some of his debates in Parliament. Is that the kind of thing? And what would we be trying to solve in that economy that is clearly choking development?
Quite right. I mean, I think either we have joined him or you have joined us. I don't know which one. Because, I mean, we have called the economic discussion for many years now. We have called to have a meeting to talk about the economic. I mean, we even said we need them to have a meeting with the economic cluster with the intention of redefining what economy do we need as a country, and what are the structures, what is the architecture of the economy dispensation that is then required. Because the current structure of the economy, we've inherited the current issues. And that's why even the funding model is based on the current setup. It's nothing to do with the new things. And if we're then to talk about the economic CODESA, so to speak, it basically means that that's where we'll then talk about the concentration. We'll then talk about the structure of the economy, the conglomerates, the dominance player in the market. That's where, again, Competition Commission will then come in to say, to what extent do we then talk about the public opinion if there is a merger, how then do we fast track and bring people to participate so that, again, you might then look at how the shopping malls are mushrooming in the country. They're basically even marginalizing the so-called township economy, because if you then bring pick and pay in the township, you're basically then making that old granny to close his or her shebeen, because ordinarily people, they will go and get things for the whole month on credit.
And I mean, even on those, there are some franchising rules that are also quite disadvantageous to local people. I remember when Bridge City was constructed in KwaMashu in Durban, and people from KwaMashu said, we've got the money, we can own the spa. And they were told, no, the person next in line on the franchising is X, and that person is not from the community, is of a different race, is da-da-da. But it comes in here to make money. I had a lecturer in the UK when I studied there. He said to me, Lukhona, I love your country, but man, you've transported this nonsense of shopping malls to the rest of Africa now, because this thing is not viewed as development, it's viewed as consumption. But the way our politicians love sword turning for new malls, it's quite astounding.
No, quite right. I mean, even now you look at garages, petrol stations, the forecourts. You can look at forecourts across the country, and then you ask yourself, who owns these forecourts? The same across. You come here to the city centers, the same people. You cannot then get it. And you are then saying, but why are we then excluded? So these are some of the issues.
And it's, again, this concentration issue you are raising, where I would assume that at some point, somewhere, there should be a regulation that bars a massive supermarket to also create a spaza shop in the township. I mean, so for me, this is quite logical. But you see these shops that you are saying. Of course, now BP has handed over its forecourts to a particular company. Engine has handed over its forecourts to a particular company, and it's a real concentration thing. And that's where money is made. It's not really in the Bowser with the petrol.
No,
and why are there no rules? How can a company that can be an anchor tenant, at least the Competition Commission dealt with that issue of anchor tenancy, but in practice, I'm sure it's still happening. How can a company that can be an anchor tenant in a mall also go and open up a container in a township? How is that permissible? I know there's freedom to do what, but how is that permissible? How are you, as BBC, allowing those things to happen?
It's not us allowing it. The current system is so flexible. It allows this thing, and it marginalizes the indigenous and local businesses. And I think one of the things for us is around forging ahead in spearheading a clear way of dealing with these matters. And this is one of the issues that we said, the summit this year, it was not around complaints, it was around solutions. It was around us redefining what are the things that are going to do in the next coming period, to the extent that we even said we are going to start now even taking government to court, taking various institutions to court, so that how dare you allow a conglomerate to come and marginalize the indigenous businesses in the township, where the tenant and everyone, it comes somewhere else. And local industries, they don't have a role to play. They cannot even have a shelf to pack their beans or their spinach. But you're then saying you have local farmers, but they cannot
sell anything
into that thing. So these are some of the issues that we'll be dealing with in the next coming period. And I think it is also critical when we talk about the economic indaba or CODESA, because these are some of the critical issues that we need them to say. We need them to talk about it. You also then look at the feeding scheme in different schools.
Yeah.
You go to the rural area, go to the township, the food comes somewhere else. The only thing that the local people are doing is to cook.
Is to cook the food.
To cook the food. But
the contracts are residing, supply contracts are residing with outsiders from...
The transportation and everything. So it cannot be. I'm saying it cannot be business as usual. And this is the reason why we basically said it cannot be business as usual going forward. We need them to look at this thing. I mean, this government must basically then tell us whether are we part of this economy or we are not?
And in its hands, I mean, government has, and there's the last thing I want us to explore, because you raised it at the start. I mean, the entire problem, I say, this country has is a procurement problem. Whether people remove people from boards, they appoint wrong people, underskilled, they want access to the gravy. Yes. That is the procurement. And government has a lot of money in its hands that is being highly contested, by the way, because even the people who are anti-transformation, I mean, they don't mind going to court with the preferential procurement framework. SANRAL got interdicted on over 60 projects that were happening over what would have been a new preferential procurement framework for SANRAL. The board eventually folded and withdrew that framework, which then put into limbo other projects who would have been advertised with that. And there's been no new policy that has really come out from SANRAL. What is happening? This procurement, because of course there's corruption in government, but we tend to not accept that actually there are a lot of very much big businesses that rely for survival on procurement within the state.
No, quite right. They are. I mean, remember, they use the scalability, they use the dominance, they use their resources, they use many other things then to basically bulldoze this thing. I mean, if we then let's look at now where pensioners they buy. They buy at big retail shops because they have the systems in place at the back of marginalizing local businesses. Because, I mean, whether it's Pick and Pay, wherever they go there, they use their SASSA cards. They can even draw cash. So if you run a spaza shop or run a shop in the Sikisiki, so you cannot have that system. You don't. Then you're excluded. So the design of this thing is by choice, because you have designed something to exclude other people. And that's the reason why these big conglomerates, they will fight for that contract. And even if we then put certain rules on empowerment, they will basically oppose it. We have seen even during COVID, Imperial was the only company that was distributing things, despite the fact that it's a big conglomerate or big organization. Now they had all the facilities. So if it was you cannot then get a contract then to distribute, to move things from A to B, because you don't have the resources.
And it does create hostility, because remember during COVID-19, actually, I remember some parts of the Eastern Cape where trucks were now actually being stopped from delivering things, because local people were saying, but we are here, we can do this. Why do we need a company from Centurion, a GP, to come and deliver? So there is going to be some social clash if we continue in this trajectory, isn't it?
No, quite right. That's the point of that. Saying we need then to find a way of bringing historically disadvantaged. We need then to bring other businesses into the realm of these contracts. We need then to find, and consciously so, government must basically, they have a role to play in procurement, because procurement can be used then to empower and change the patterns of ownership. Procurement can then re-industrialized certain sectors, because if again you then give people to say you build a rail infrastructure from Roslyn to Kucha, and then you then partner with a company X, but you in the main you then bring black entities into that thing, so that there is a transfer of skills and knowledge. That's how you then rebuild the economy, so that everyone then participate on an equal footing, based on certain parameters and structures that we have put in place. But if you then do that thing, then becomes a problem. And hence, we're then saying we need then to find a way of bringing those people in the township. But we cannot then argue an isolated case to say we're now talking about township economy, rural economy. Rural economy on its own is not a solution, because you're basically then containing those people in their little
It's almost like you balkanize the country.
Yes.
I still struggle with the concept, by the way, township economy, rural economy, because I think that there's one economy, and then this economy must be equitable, must be fair, must be accessible,
integrated.
and must be integrated
Yes.
across. Because now we then leave those township areas to say they should be like that, and almost like we accept the townships now.
No, we don't
yet
accept.
the townships were a problem.
No, we don't accept that thing, because remember, the township is a concept that originates from the apartheid system. To say black people, they need them to be segregated, they need them to be outside the main city centers. They must then transport and spend huge amount of money. And now we want them to change that patterns and the outlook of the cities and the townships. And if we are then to do that thing, is the integration. Hence, we are then arguing for an integrated approach. To say, if we then talk about the economy, we need then to integrate those people into the mainstream economy. We cannot then talk about the integration at the same time. Then we're saying this one, they must be kept aside and remain in the rural and township.
And even how we build low-cost housing, RDP houses, we tend to then sustain that disintegration. I mean,
Model, yeah.
of course, there are some successful projects like the Konubia project in Umhlanga, Tegwini, which really brought people closer to economic activity, economic hub, and not necessarily segregate them, as you are saying. But I think as a parting shot, how worried would you say you are about the state of black business?
I think there are three things or four things. I think as an organization, we are much better compared to all previous years. We have a stable leadership. We have a clear strategy in place. We have a clear plan. We have an execution. That's one. The second thing, we see the challenges. And those challenges, despite the fact that we have identified them as solutions, as challenges, but we also equally so have defined and develop solutions to address them. In terms of the penetration of the economy, we're still seeing, I think we have moved on a snail pace to date in 31 years, because we cannot confidently say we have a black bank, as a classical example. We don't have a big retail outlets that you can then say is owned by black people. We don't have a big property business. So hence I'm just using those examples. Yeah. And then saying we need then to move faster, quicker. And I think once the procurement regulations they're sorted, I guess that's where we hang our head on procurement. And we're not just folding our arms. We're basically pushing Treasury to say we need the regulation so that it can then assist in moving faster, quicker, on an expeditious basis to transform the current economic setup. So that the question of the ownership and the control, in the next coming 5, 10, 15 years, we want basically then to see a substantial move and shift on that basis. And we can then say confidently we have achieved something when there is 40% achievement of black entities.
Well, I can't let you go without asking you to say, aye. No, but thank you so much, Elias. Very illuminating conversation, and I think there's much more. You'll probably be back here at SMWX in future to talk to us about many other touch points that we probably did not delve into as much as we could. That was my guest, the president of the Black Business Council, Elias Monage. Aye.